Well, hello, hello. He made it. Hey, Justin, we're starting in just 2 minutes, brother.
Tracking. All good. You can hear me okay?
We can hear you fine, man. This is an amazing surprise. We love it. We're gonna have to tell our guest exactly what occurred there throughout the day. I guess I might as well turn on my video if you guys can see me or not. Hopefully you can. Can you see me? Here we go. Oh yeah, there I am. Ian, this is going to be our first webinar. It's going to be off the cuff. It's not going to be your normal boring webinar. So just heads up, folks. We're going to have some fun on this webinar. We'll tell you a little bit of background story why we're very excited for Justin to be here. And for those of you joining, we're going to give our guest probably another minute to join, and we'll start right on time. Hi, Mikhail from Houston, Texas. Awesome. Good to see you guys. Are we going to send the recording? Absolutely. Gustavo, we will absolutely send the recording for you. Ian, the most interesting outcomes will always be. That's all I'm going to say. Awesome. And hey, Matt from New Jersey. You're welcome, Gustavo. Okay, good. We're almost top of the hour here, and we'll make sure we start on time, about 15 seconds. For those of you joining, let us know if you're part of the IT team or the security team or both in the chat. We want to know if you're in the IT team. If you're in the IT team, just put IT. If you're in the security team, put security. If you're handling both, well, put both, okay? We want to know. Pixels IT team, awesome. Hi, Laura, Holly. Okay, our chat is going. There we go. Let's get that chat rolling. Awesome, everyone, and welcome to Enveedo's first webinar. We are very much excited for y'all to be here. We've got some developers, some security folks, some folks in IT, some folks that are part of both teams. We are very excited to bring you our very first webinar. Before we do that, we want to first introduce ourselves and let y'all know who we are. IT team, let's go. Thanks, Damien. We got that and heard that from you. A lot of IT teams. We're very excited for this, by the way. And as I said, this is going to be a very casual webinar, right? It's not going to be your button-up three-piece suit type of thing. We want to engage with y'all. We want to know if you guys have any questions, please put it on the chat. If we can answer them, we will answer them today. If we can't, we will get back to you, of course. And so, Ian, I think the first thing we want to do is introduce ourselves to everybody on the call. Let them all know who we are. My name is Denmark Francisco. Been in the industry for about 14 years. I am the ex-chief marketing officer of KnowBe4. I did a little bit of growth hacking at DigitalOcean. For those of you in cloud, if you're a developer, you'll know what DigitalOcean is. And I've gone through a few acquisitions, and the numbers are there. My compadre, my presenter today is going to be Ian Atchison. That's not Atchison, it's Atchison. That's without an N purposely. He's got over 16 years of IT experience. He was at Cylance. He's very experienced as a CISO, virtual CISO, as a consultant, as an advisor, and he's actually leading our product management here at Enveedo, which we're very excited when Ian joined. And of course, our astute guest, and the next slide, we're probably going to laugh about this, is Justin Fanelli. We are so excited for him to be here, and we'll tell you guys why in a moment. But Justin's has over 20 years in cybersecurity, engineering, and IT, both in public and private sectors, which is by far a huge differentiator. And he's a true opinion leader in the space. He is actually a professor both at Georgetown and Marymount, and he teaches cybersecurity, IT strategy, and governance. So Ian, you want to say hello to Justin, kind of say hello to the group here while I look at the chat?
Yeah, hey everybody. Justin, glad you could make it.
Big thumbs up. First off, Justin, where are you? Are you in the airport? Are you in an office at a very big, large house? Where are you at right now?
I am in an airport, and by the end of the call, I won't be in an airport anymore. I'll probably be in the air, but I am as happy to make it as you are to have me.
Awesome. And what time is Wheels Up? Just so I know, if you're at that particular airport, what time is Wheels Up?
I don't want to tell you that. Just know that this ticket was booked at about 11 a.m. today.
Got it. Okay. So how much time do we have with you?
As much as we need, or 20 minutes.
20 minutes it is. Let's roll. We are going to make sure that jet flies on time. All right, folks. So the funny thing is, if we put on the next slide, Ian, we were practicing a couple days ago with Justin for this webinar, and Justin had said that something might come up, very important meeting at our at our national capital in DC. And we said, you know what, it's going to be interesting. Okay, if Justin will be here, he'll be here. If not, not. And we got a text today, or an email today, saying that he has to go to Washington, DC for a meeting. And we said, well, let's just do it anyway. So Justin, we literally put a lightning rod and some smoke around your profile because we were like, well, we're going to go and do it anyway. And if Justin shows up, great. If not, great too. And so we are very excited to be here. And we have about 20 minutes with you. So we're going to kick that off. So hopefully you won't kill us with a lightning bolt. All right. All right. So we've got a few questions here that we want to talk about today. And for those of you, it looks like I'm looking at the chat, a lot of IT folks, a lot of IT team members, some are handling both. There is a developer, Mercy, and some security team members. Okay. And the very first question that we want to pose is, what keeps security leaders up at night? And that's really what we, from your experience, Justin, from what you're hearing from your peers in both the private sector and the public sector, what's keeping security leaders up at night at this time?
Yeah, I think there's any number of things. One thing we know for sure is that we'd all like to sleep better. It's literally overwhelming at this point. There's a lot of boats. There's a lot of it people, and security is everywhere, right? I was at a panel last night with some Google execs, and they made a comment. They said, hey, the generational pace of technology change used to be, in our careers, every 5 to 15 years. Now it's every 6 months to 1.2 years. It has gotten 5 times faster, essentially in the last decade, which means we have 5 times more demands, 5 times more data minimum, literally a lot more than that, right? So between the generational technological change, the data pieces and the data overload, and then all of the both and where we are with workforce, I'd say that the things that keep us up is just how to get our arms around this whole thing. And so if we try to eat the elephant, really it's like a family of elephants. And I have as big an appetite as anybody, but if we're not doing that in some sort of systematic way, it's going to eat us. And so I think there's any number of things that are getting after it right now. But if we can think about it as an integrated problem, as opposed to chasing one-offs, we have a chance of catching up. My favorite answer to that question that I've ever heard in my life during my time at Department of Defense and Intelligence Community was General Mattis, the Secretary of Defense at the time, said, I keep people up at night. I'd love us to be so prepared that we're the problem, that we feel ready for the next day. And so we really turn that around. And there are places that we're doing that.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Justin. Ian, from your perspective, I know you're boots on the ground with our current customers, with our partners. And you've been in the industry for 16 years, and I know you have constant conversations. Can you shed some light on what you're hearing as of late?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our customers that we work with, I mean, one of the reasons they come to us is because, and this is one of the questions we ask them right at the very beginning, is always, what keeps you up at night? And it's often, I don't know what I don't know. And what they really tend to be saying is, I don't have full visibility, right? I don't know what all the business lines of business are doing. It's really hard to gain that level of visibility on my own, right? And I think a lot of times, especially for folks that are coming from more of an IT background, their organization typically says, well, you're the smart person, you know technology. Guess what? You could do security too. It's the same thing, right? So they have to figure out, well, now how do I navigate that, right? And it's that that prioritizing, like, how do I prioritize it? You know, you mentioned like eating the whole elephant. Well, now there's a whole herd, right? So how do I prioritize that? Like, it's a lot for them to take on. And I think that's what they're trying to figure out, right? Like, where do I begin?
Interesting. You know, your answer, and I'm just going to maybe riff on this, right? Again, this is a very casual conversation. Justin, just from what he said, you know, technology's moving, you know, in a very fast pace from 6 months to, you know, 1.2 years, I think is what you said. Is that adding on to the challenge? I'm not going to say problem, because yeah, we're at work, we handle problems all day, but like in terms of a challenge, the speed factor, and then, you know, Ian, from your perspective, is that something that y'all there's a crossover in that answer?
You want to go first, Justin?
Sure. I mean, so for me, one of my favorite riffs on challenges is what Chinese character for chaos is the same as opportunity, right?
That's right.
So no matter what you're doing, what you don't want is no challenges. Bad things happen when you have no challenges. It means you're sitting at home on your bed, not doing anything. Everyone here and everyone we associate with in general is trying to make something happen. So what flavor of challenge do you want? Well, the harder things you do, the more challenges you have. The question is, are you like trying to punch or shadow box in the night, or do you know what the hell you're doing? And so on that, the idea of, hey, we're going faster, we're going into this abyss, let's do it intelligently. Now we can really start to make some sense of that.
Awesome. Ian, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I still think it really comes down to that prioritization, right? Like it's understanding like where you prioritize. Like otherwise you're trying to do it all, and it means you're probably not doing anything all that well. You're kind of doing bits and pieces well, but it's not a more comprehensive approach. So yeah, I think it comes down to really like having that plan of how you're going to prioritize, which kind of gets into the next question, right, around all the different challenges, right?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Yeah, so I guess maybe Justin, I'll even kind of throw this over at you, right? So with remote work, right, we've all been doing it for a few years now. Some are still doing it, some are doing a hybrid, and some are back in the office. Between that and more of this, you know, keep hearing about cloud first initiatives for organizations. Do you see that adding to the problem or even the challenge for organizations?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly brought a lot of things to the forefront, right? So we saw that in the first 3 months of the pandemic, hacking went up 10x, not 10%, 1,000%, right? And so the security, I mean, and that's a profitable market now. If anyone thinks this is less mature than a full-on market that we're up against, they're well funded and they can do one on many. And so I'd say, did it make things harder? Yes, but we had to adapt. We're an adapting people. And if we had not adapted, we wouldn't be working. So the worst security is the kind that stops you from working. We're measuring productivity and security one-on-one, right? Mano a mano. And so if we have to be productive, and people are, and it makes them less secure, then you're probably not playing the long game. But that's part of the prioritization. What we know in general is that peanut butter spread tastes good on bread, but that's about the only time that is a winning strategy. So we do have to prioritize. I personally like to prioritize based on impact and outcomes, because we all want quick wins in our job. It allows us to have the confidence and momentum to build on that and be compounding. We're going after things that take 2 or 3 years. It's going to be someone else doing it.
Yeah, I think the other thing to keep in mind too.
The last few years, you said it's definitely 10x. Am I still here?
Yes.
It says my internet was unstable. Obviously, the internet obviously, you know, from a hacking perspective, it's increased drastically, right? But what we're also hearing here, and maybe Ian, you can share with us, is like how the work grew larger, not less, in the last few years. But it's not like the resources more, right? Like if I asked our group here, our audience, like how many of y'all in the last few years got more team members and or more teammates? I actually want to know, did you get more money as a budget, or did you get more teammates? And Ian, maybe you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all working in the industry, so it's no surprise there's been a lot of layoffs too in a lot of areas, right? So in some ways the work's growing, and then some of the teams have even been shrinking. I think some of that's coming back from what we've just talking with folks, just following LinkedIn. But yeah, the work has definitely grown. I think the problem that people try to do is, they're trying to tackle the problems alone because they're trying to run really fast. Justin, you talk about impact and outcomes, right? I think a lot of IT and even security leaders, both for large enterprise and even more mid-market size companies, I think they have to solve the problem on their own, whereas they don't tend to reach out to the business and successfully get them to engage, right? And what I mean by that is understanding what is critical to their business, right? As an organization, like building that consensus to understand what is important, what essentially generates revenue, right? What can we live without? I think a lot of times organizations don't understand that. So when we move over to like a remote work or cloud first initiative, understanding what's the driver, what's actually being stored in these cloud services, what controls are you actually inheriting versus what are you responsible for? I think sometimes folks think, oh, I moved to the cloud, so I've got all of the security now. And that's not always the case. You need to really understand what the vendors are actually providing and what you're responsible for. And the way you partly understand that is working with the business and having these conversations around, what are critical applications for their department, right? And from their understanding, you may learn that they're using something you're not aware of. That's not uncommon. So understanding what that is kind of the first step, and what data is stored in those systems, and understanding what controls may be turned on, and maybe taking over management of those systems as well. But it's really kind of a collaborative effort, I think, to understand what you're gaining and what you're responsible for the cloud. And then also even from like a remote perspective, which I'll pause there a minute before we go into that one. But I think it's really kind of understanding, right? Like reaching out. This isn't necessarily something you can do on your own. If you have to make more with less, you need to kind of bring in more people to the conversation, right? And make it worth it to them, not just, kind of being a sort of the ankle biter sort of person in the org saying, hey, I got a question. And they're focused on their job, which may not be security. It's kind of something we keep hearing a lot from our customers.
Okay, there's actually a question here from Sasi Kiran. I'm just going to call it out now because it's actually a really good question. And maybe Justin and Ian, y'all can both answer this. The question is, how can I provide my employees who works remotely with an advanced protected environment, all kind of assets? And that's a question from Sasi Kiran. What can they do about this? And maybe we can cover it briefly now or cover it later, but Justin, Ian?
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, I have an extended, I probably have a few million remote workers. This is a challenge that kind of everyone's facing, and it's really a scale question. This gets tricky, and what you don't want is snowflakes, because the more different types that we have out there, the harder it gets to manage. I've talked to a lot of companies that have, hey, I have 30 cyber products, or I have 80 cyber products, so I must be really secure. Probably not, right? That doesn't have, more isn't better here. So where you can have a single, and I can tell you what we do at some of my different organizations, but in general, if you have a single baseline, the more homogeneous that is, the more similar that is, the easier it is to manage. And so then you can do that a little bit more like we've done with mobile over the past few years to get that more secure. Making something more complicated or having a lot of one-offs, complexity is very hard to scale, and it's very hard to manage.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Hopefully, Sasi, that answers your question. Anything to add to that, Ian?
No, I mean, that's a pretty good recommendation there, right? I mean, just keep it simple, right? The more complexity you throw into it, the less secure it's going to be, the more management overhead you're going to take on, because you just made all these exceptions, and you're always going to have them. But to Justin's point, I mean, keep them within like kind of a clearly defined sort of bucket around when exceptions do have to come into play.
Totally. I appreciate it. And I think
on that,
go ahead, Justin.
Can I riff on that real quick?
Absolutely.
Do.
in general, the demand is up, right? For her question, but in general, the demand is up. We don't necessarily have any more resources. We may have gotten an extra percentage or two. And so for most of our lives, IT has been something that you depend on, but it's not important until it doesn't work. This is the time in our lives that I've seen, and people are kind of following this trend where we can go on offense and say, where can we save time? People have talked for the longest time about, oh, I'm scared of AI or automation taking away people's jobs. People are burned out. We need to give them time back. That's the human machine teaming. So where we can save time, make this more productive, make this more manageable, and lower all of our blood pressures because we take one step back and we have a way of thinking about this. We've all been successful, the folks who are on the line here, because we've rolled up our sleeves and worked really hard. That doesn't work if you're trying to get to California. You have to get on a plane. So I'm gonna get on a plane now, but don't work harder, work smarter.
Did he just drop the mic on us?
The timing was perfect.
That was epic. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't make this up. Like, Justin is literally getting on a private jet right now to go to a meeting, right? Like, Ian, and he answers it and drops the mic. He doesn't even say goodbye. Like, this is why I love working from home, partly, is because this is like literally so off the cuff. Like, this is like, you can't plan for that. So first off, we want to thank Justin. If you have any questions for Justin, please put them in the webinar chat here. For those asking, the coffee is on us. It's on its way. All right. You haven't received it yet. Got it, Victor. We'll send it as soon as this is done. And then for the questions that we have coming in before or after, we'll get it answered to you. Okay. We'll continue, Ian. I think just the two of us.
He could come back. You never know. You really just never know with him.
He could be on the plane. I mean, he doesn't have he doesn't have a long security line. The guy has like security clearance at very high levels. I don't know if I could say that, but it's pretty public information. All right, awesome. The last question we want to answer is, how can IT and security teams overcome these obstacles? And I think this is like one of probably the most important questions that we have. Ian, can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to speak kind of from the customers that we work with. Really, and I kind of started with it at the start of the call. It's really kind of engagement with the business, right? Getting those stakeholders, because again, the work is growing, but you're not getting more resources. So Just even talked about it, right? Like, we have to kind of expand our capabilities. Part of that is really kind of bringing in the different leaders within your organization to get input from them, because they kind of become these little sensors for you to understand when maybe there's some new initiatives coming down from a department. It may not be at the organizational level, so you may not have any visibility into it. So kind of bringing them into the conversation early is important. And how do you get them to do that? You kind of show them that there's something valuable for them, right? I kind of can talk about it from like an Enveedo perspective. When we're bringing customers in, we talk about what we refer to as the crown jewels for the organization. And what we're talking about is those critical assets or functions to the business, right? You can't do that in a vacuum. You have to bring in other people from the organization. And to do that, we actually bring in the different stakeholders from all the different departments, usually anywhere from 5 to 7 people. And it's really to understand from their view, what's important, right? What is critical to keep the business running? If they had an outage of some sort, what can they live without? So when we have those conversations, a lot of times they come in, like somebody told them they have to show up, right? When we see them going through the survey, by the end of it, and we hear this more times than not, they actually say, this was a really good exercise. I've never thought about things in this way because I'm so focused in my world. They start thinking about how it impacts the organization, because we all work for an organization. We don't work for a specific department. Usually in our organization, we work for the organization as a whole. So we typically basically grab that information from them, and then we do more of a consensus, right? At the end of the day, we want to understand what's critical, what's highly valuable, and then what's important. The important things, we don't want to forget about it, right? But the business can survive if it doesn't have it. So understanding what those critical assets or functions are, I think is the first way to start establishing support and get everybody heard, right? Like everybody wants to be heard, they want to have input. When they start doing that and you give them the output of that conversation, or the next thing when you're doing assessments, right? And prioritizing what's critical and what you're going to be protecting, they tend to take a bit more ownership in the process. So it's kind of really building that sort of consensus. And then that's really how you're defining that impact, right? What's the potential impact of an outage, right? Well, you know what's important to the business. Now we can start talking about what's the impact if we don't have it, and then how do we protect it? Versus trying to just say, we're going to protect all the things. And really, you bring in a bunch of different tools, and really nothing's all that secure because you just can't keep eyes on it, or you don't really have a plan on how it's all going to complement each other, or really what you're working towards, right? And that's a big part of what we hear from customers when they're coming on board. So how do you overcome it? I think it's totally buy-in and prioritization. Those are the two first parts, because it's a culture you want to create. Everybody always says that. It sounds silly sometimes, but the reality is you want to talk about these things. You make it useful to people, right? How do they protect themselves? Not just at work, right? They're on a personal phone. They might have work email on there. They may have SharePoint or OneDrive or anything like that, right? We want to make sure that people are being thoughtful in how they do things in their personal lives and within the business. Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing is like, you have to identify like what to protect, right? With your leaders. And then the how part, right? And I think that's like important to like emphasize for a moment, right? Like, I mean, we've dealt with, obviously we have a lot of IT professionals, you know, on this call, and I think we even talked about it. Justin talked about the amount of breaches and hacking activities, right? It's like 10x, he said, right, in the last 3 years, like since COVID has happened. You know, the fact that like the amount of work is growing larger and larger, and not necessarily less for IT team members and the security team members. And then you obviously have the part where you have to identify with like the leadership, like what's actually important for them. I guess the next question is like, how does Enveedo get involved? Like, where do we come in? I know you're on the product side, I'm on the marketing side. Like at the end of the day, that the organization is only as good as a product, right? What are we doing here? Yeah. So how we do it, I think that's probably the way to start, right? From an Enveedo perspective, you know, we start with understanding the risk, right, to the organization. And to do that, you know, we're going to take data in through APIs from various systems, IT, business applications, et cetera. We start with risk assessment and artifact collection. We do a combination of things, right? Whether it's automated or some of it's manual, because as much as we love to say, you know, AI is going to take over everything, humans still have a value. So we want that input from the humans. Can I say something about that? I'm sorry to interrupt the whole AI conversation, right? Like this is a off the cuff, like there's lots of conversation in digital about AI. But I think the one thing that we as professionals and just humans forget is asking the question of who designed the AI, right? So that ends it. Like, obviously, if the designer designed it to overcome humans in the future, which is like obviously a very sci-fi thing, it's just we have to ask like the designer, like, did you design it that way? And if you don't, it won't do that. Right. That's all. Yeah. Anyways. Yeah. Go on ahead. So we bring that data in, right? We can prioritize that within the platform. So we're giving you immediate feedback, right, on things you can fix in prioritized fashion, with recommendations on how to fix it, right? So a lot of, if you think about what a typical assessment looks like for an organization, it's here's everything you're not doing. And then here's all the list of everything you should do. And you want to be perfect, right? The goal is to be, you know, at that top mark. Well, that doesn't always make sense for organizations, right? And when you understand what you're protecting, then you can decide how. Maybe you don't need to be at the top tier because what you're, you know, across the organization, there may be parts of it that you want to protect, but we give you that prioritized roadmap. Part of that data ingestion that I talked about is understanding your business, right? What do you do? What's important, right? Because we're not going to give the same recommendations to one organization or prioritization compared to another that's in a different industry or vertical, right? So take that information, we start building your roadmap for security. Generally, we're looking at 6 months in the product is what we don't go beyond that because things change quickly. I always used to laugh. I used to do risk assessments and program assessments, and we would give them a 12-month to 24-month roadmap. It was good for about 8 months at best.
And
so,
now the technology is moving so fast, as Justin was talking about. By the way, that was an awesome data point.
yeah,
In terms of how fast technology is from the seniors of Google. So thank you for that data point. We did not expect that. And you're talking about the roadmap that's literally 6 months.
Yeah. So when you think about that, you're paying for this assessment no matter we give you 6 months of useful data or 24 months of mostly irrelevant data. You're still paying the same thing, right? It doesn't change. It's a static point in time assessment. So part of what, the integrations that we're doing with Enveedo, you're getting continuous updates, right? You're continuously having your posture evaluated and giving recommendations and tracking your progress. I think that's a big one, right? You do your annual assessment, whether you're doing it in Excel on your own or you're doing it with a third party. You get your point in time assessment, you do all this work to fix it, and you hope that it looks better in 12 months when you do it again. And you don't really have a clear picture, right? So we give you that continuous visibility for your organization, and we measure maturity as well within the platform, right? So we're going to say, you're starting at, let's say, a level 1 if we're talking about CMMI from a maturity model perspective, and maybe the goal is to be a 3, right? That might be appropriate for you. I think this old thinking of everybody should be at a level 4 or 5 is sort of out of date, right? Because it's not always appropriate for everybody. So we guide you through that process in the product to teach you, how to define what's realistic and where you need to be, and really kind of that goal setting activity.
That's all. Absolutely. The couple of points, actually. Number one, the point that you said is the static assessment, right? It's like a point in time assessment, right? Which could quickly go out of date versus a dynamic update. That's what I put on the notes, by the way. I'm taking notes myself. Can you elaborate a little bit more of the two differences as like how assessment 6 months ago could be completely outdated for some of us or those of us that's on the call?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's either done their own internal assessment or has had the third party do the assessment, more times than not, there's a project that's addressing one or multiple control questions that is in progress, right? But it's not done, which means you have not implemented the control, right? But maybe 2 months later, after your assessment's done, it's finished. So everything you've had at that point is out of date, right? There's no tracking or clear tracking on where you are. So that's kind of where I think the benefit and what we hear is it's nice to be able to see the progress over time. It's nice to actually build a work plan and be able to manage it in one place and not have to, try to recreate it somewhere else or, track multiple documents or even work with some tools that are really more of a glorified spreadsheet in a browser. It is actually, we have a workflow management capability that really looks more like some of the more popular tools people have used in their in their work environment, and it's really intended to just make it easy, right? Track progress and the various stages organizations are across their life cycle.
That's awesome. I mean, this is actually one of those things that I want to take a moment and really emphasize, right? Like when you have a program, a list of things to do, and you're grinding day in, day out, week to week, month to month, trying to protect the organization, right? Like the program that you may be working off of could potentially be outdated, right? This is actually the emphasis of this. And this is why I'm taking a moment to discuss it. And by the way, Justin said, props from the air. So Justin, have a great flight, brother. But this is one of those things, like we live in a very dynamic world, right? Like nothing ever stays the same. It's either going to go up or down. And we know, at least in security and in IT, nothing ever stays the same. Like updates occur. There's a new attack vector. There's a new trick that the bad folks are attempting on our organizations. And having that dynamic like program where you're getting updated, not working off of like 6 months ago is super key, right? And we understand there's more work right? And spreadsheets really, well, we know spreadsheets get outdated and they get lost in the server somewhere. And this is really what our platform is doing, is we've combined all of those things in a single place for you to be in. Am I forgetting anything on that? And then the maturity level, it's continual, right? You're not expected to go from a 1 to a 4 or 5 overnight. And anyone who promises that is really full of BS. I mean, if I could just be very frank with everyone, right? Like if you're at a 1 level of your cybersecurity maturity, right? And somebody goes, yeah, we'll get you to 4 or 5 in a matter of X, like in a matter of a month, like, or 2 months or 3 months, or sometimes they won't even discuss how long, right? So that they're not on the hook, which is what we've seen in cyber, right? Like all these empty promises of like how great things are, but there's no continual improvements, which is what we're going after. It's just like, if we can improve little by little, and but at the same time, if there's a critical action to be done that you're in the know and that you can do something about it, that's the most important part of the equation.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I might add to that is, there's different approaches to building a program, right? There's the pure compliance approach that some organizations take, and sometimes say like that's the way they want to do it, like that's the way that they want to do it. But what we found over the last, at least 10 years is organizations will be compliant, but when they're compromised, right? And then everybody in this call at some point has had their data exposed through one of the last major breaches. But all those companies were compliant. So taking more of a checklist sort of compliance approach, it's just, in the end, it's not going to get you to a level of like resiliency when it comes to security or even a strong defensive posture. So we actually take more of the approach of, we're going to build a secure program and we're going to prioritize it. It's not always going to be big ticket items, right? Like that's part of the workflow, and that we build when we prioritize your roadmap is, it could be things that are, it's hours, and hours are hours. Like let's not kid ourselves, right? Like we all manage or struggle to manage time in the day, but knowing that you're going to take action and it's going to have a tangible impact, I think is hugely beneficial. So approaching security is sort of the way we approach the problem or the challenge, and that inevitably will get you to the state of compliance you're looking for, right? And ideally, you're better off for it because you're actually able to protect your organization from compromises. I mean, when Justin talked about during the pandemic, things went up, 10x. I mean, that tells us most organizations, and you can look at the market, a lot of organizations and a lot of tools out there focus on the compliance problem, right? We really believe strongly that focusing on building a proper security program will get you there. And that has benefits along the way, right? You're doing it once, do it correctly, and you just keep moving through the process.
Right. Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, right? Like, I think there's a lot of IT professionals that may agree with this. If you don't, you can disagree with it and you can put it on the chat. I'm more than happy to obviously discuss it. But like what I've found in the years that I've been in cyber, like there's a lot of tools and platforms folks can purchase, right? You can purchase security awareness training, you can purchase EDR, you can purchase MDR if you need that service, right? You can purchase pen testing, right? You can purchase a lot of things if you have unlimited budget. All of us have limited budgets, right? Let's just be honest. But the one thing that like hasn't really been talked about is the actual security program, right? Where both IT and security teams have to be involved. Yep. And this is actually where this is why we exist. This is our mission, right? Is to actually get both IT team and security teams working together, because at the end of the day, if or when the organization, fingers crossed, gets breached, someone's going to get fired. And it could be you, it could be your teammate, it could be your boss, it could be the entire organization's. And what we've seen is when breaches happen, the public relations damage to the organization, if you are a publicly traded organization, could definitely affect your market cap, right? If you are in the private sector and you're not publicly traded, your ability to get new business or ongoing business with your current customers, your image is completely damaged, right? And that one way, shape, or form, whether folks in IT and or security thinks of it from an altruistic perspective, that could potentially affect your survival, right? You could have a job or not have a job if that happens. And so, and we're being very upfront with this. And so what we want to do is we want to actually bring the IT and security teams together, working together as a cohesive group.
Yeah, and I think that's something people forget is there's sometimes like a little bit this like headbutting between the two teams.
Sure.
Because a lot of times security is setting the requirements, and depending on the organization, that might get sent over to IT, right?
Right.
For them to actually implement. The other part of it is for some organizations, and I don't think this is just a small company problem. I have friends that are in public companies where their security team is probably more the IT team that does handle security. They might have one or two people, but for IT teams that have to be responsible for security, I think it's important to remember, or even ask like why, like build more of a report, understand like why. I think when people know why they're doing something, it's much easier to kind of accept, right? Versus just being told what to do. Most people don't like that without knowing like what's the value, right? So I think,
Right.
We know what the goal is, and that's kind of where I was saying with like the identifying critical assets, and you're talking about reputation, even understanding like reputational harm could be a crown jewel for the organization, right? Depending
Right.
on what it is.
Which
If
we've
you
seen
rely
that.
on public perception, yeah. So understanding we're doing this for this reason, right?
Right.
And as an organization, we've all agreed that this is how we're approaching this problem, right?
Absolutely.
Versus say one person said this, but we don't really have consistency. I mean, that's really what we see. And I've been with Enveedo for nearly 6 months now, I think. And one of the early calls I saw was we did the crown jewels assessment, and for one customer, they were very tightly aligned. Like it was amazing to see how much they communicated, and they all knew what the mission was, right? What was important. We've seen others where it's just spread out.
All over the place.
It's all over the place. Right.
Right.
But by the end of it, they've been able to come together and identify it. I think actually that they even all have acknowledged like it made them better as an organization because now they all know what's important. Right. It's kind of almost like organizations that have to go through the process of identifying like your mission and vision, right? Like what are our values? It's
Right.
sort of in that vein of understanding this is what we're here for, right? From an IT and security perspective, this is what we're here for, right? And we're all going in the same direction. I think that
Right.
makes a huge difference versus always running into blockers and feeling like, oh gosh, here comes IT and security again, or I got to go talk to that department. Like instead,
That's right.
it's more of a collaborative effort. It makes it a much more enjoyable environment from what we've seen and what we've heard.
Absolutely. And I just got time checked, so we got 4 minutes. Let's kind of go through the other thing that I want to inform those viewers here, right? Like as IT professional and as security professionals, like the keys of the organization are in your hands. Like you have a huge amount of responsibility, right? And you're not just a quote unquote IT manager, right? In the back or in the old office, like you actually, it could make or break an organization, and it's that important of a team. And we understand that like sometimes certain individuals in the organization don't deem it as important as their job. They have a very high self-importance, but the reality is like when you're able to do a crown jewels assessment, which is your critical asset and data, and you go to the actual business leaders, this gives you a ton of control, and it gives you that high of a value in their eyes, right? Once they know what those are. So maybe we can touch upon that for the next minute, Ian, in terms of the architecture, and we'll wrap up.
Yeah. So this is more of a overall view of how the product's built, right? So we take data in, there's obviously the data ingest, data collection, and running it through our risk management engine, right? So that's where we're generating those recommendations. And again, it's intended to take you through the process based on where you're starting from and where you're trying to get to. Prioritize roadmap. We shouldn't even talk about it all. Purchasing technology, selecting partners, that's a whole challenge on its own. There's a ton out there, right? So with our smart marketplace, we've actually curated a list of vendors that we've reviewed personally, and we've brought into the store, invited into the store. So I think that's a big challenge. A lot of organizations don't know where to begin. If you look up, anti-malware, if you look up cloud security or identity providers, you'll get information around zero trust. You'll get information around identity, single sign-on providers. It really, if you don't know where you're starting from, we actually will drive you to a short list to help you. Doesn't mean you have to go through it, but it does help you kind of narrow down the view there. And then obviously our concierge service, which is client success management, and our virtual CISO team. They're there not to replace you or to be a dedicated kind of person in your organization, but it's really there when you want to help navigate a problem or solve a problem. It's almost like phone a friend. Is kind of how I think about it, right? How do I get around this challenge? Which is helpful. And then obviously the modules we talked about, the crown jewels analysis, program assessments, workflow management, all of that. Obviously there's a lot there. We can go through it maybe on another time, but
yeah, we got a minute, or else we get kicked out of this webinar on from Zoom. The one thing, folks, as you're seeing this, right, this platform is actually live. You can take it for a spin. We're not offering this on a roadmap. It's not quote unquote just on paper. We have a live platform that you can absolutely get a demo on, and we have about 45 seconds. So number one, I want to thank everybody. Ian, any landing last points here? Any questions, comments, or remarks? Any questions?
No,
I don't know if
you're interested. I think there were some comments in the chat and you can reach out to, or otherwise just go to enveedo.com and you can contact us through there. Love
Absolutely.
to chat more.
Folks, that's it. That's time's up. We've got about 30 seconds before we get kicked out. We've enjoyed this. We're going to do more of this. It's going to be off the cuff, very casual. We're not going to be in suits, and you never know what you see again. And Justin, thank you so much. Have a safe flight, brother, and happy July 4th for those in the United States. And we'll see you guys on the flip side. Bye, everyone.
Good, everyone.